Whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Glenda Lewis, and I was born October 11th, a Wednesday, in 1939 in Wilmar, California. Now, Wilmar is an unincorporated area of Los Angeles County, and I always said Wilmar until I applied for my first passport, and they said I was born in Alhambra. So legally, I guess Alhambra was the closest town to where I was born. I was born at 6:06 in the evening, and my mother was Opal Irene Mann, M-A-N-N, and my father was Owen Harvey Lewis, and I think they were both 33 years old when I was born. I have a sister, Patricia Ann, who is about 5 years older than I am, and Mom and Dad my father was working on the Union Pacific Railroad when we were both born, but 5 weeks after I was born, he was in a really horrific train accident on the Union Pacific between Los Angeles and Las Vegas in a little area called Yermo, Y-E-R-M-O, California. And that changed our life considerably because up to that time, Dad had worked on the railroad and other menial jobs through the Depression. And after the train accident, Union Pacific settled with Mom and Dad and said that Dad would never work again, and he got 100% disability. So I don't know, I was probably 3 years old when they finally finished whatever they were doing with Union Pacific. I think they had a lawsuit going, and we moved from El Monte, where we had 5,000 chickens during the war, and we moved from there to San Dimas, California. Now, San Dimas was really country in those days. It's about 30 miles southeast of Los Angeles. And we had those 5,000 chickens still in San Dimas, and Dad worked those chickens, and that got us through World War II. Also, then he sent for his real estate license for $5 to the state of California, and he also got his insurance broker's license at that time, and then he opened up a little office in downtown San Dimas. I went to San Dimas Grammar School, and I would walk to his office after school because the school bus didn't go to my house. And I went to San Dimas Grammar School from kindergarten through 8th grade, and I graduated in 8th grade, and then I went to Bonita High School. So those are the two schools I went. During my really young youth, well, I don't remember younger than 3, but after that, Mom and Dad decided to travel. And they had neither one gone to college, so they thought that traveling would be a really good education for my sister and myself, and of course Mom and Dad. So we got a car and got in the car, and they would take us somewhere every slight holiday and all summers. Like, we went to Death Valley, we went up to the Redwoods, we went to the Big Sur, we went down to Baja, California, and we just traveled California a lot during those days. I remember we had a 1947 Studebaker, but my favorite was a 1948 Studebaker Champion that was red, because of course I like red cars. And we took that 48 Studebaker and we drove from our house in Laverne. We had moved from San Dimas to Laverne, and we drove to the Grand Canyon, and we went on north clear to Tetons and Yellowstone, Glacier National Park, and drove clear on up to the Calgary Stampede in Alberta, Canada. I was really into horses, and Dad liked his ranch stuff, so going to the Stampede was wonderful for us. But we were driving, and that was a rough country to drive in, because we got on Highway 1 to drive from Calgary over to the coast, Vancouver area. There was only one little road, and it was really treacherous. I remember looking straight up to mountains and straight down to rivers. I had a pretty good time. I had my dog with me in the back seat. Patty would sit in the front seat because she got car sick. So Mom and Dad and Patty were in the front seat, and I was in the back seat with my dog Skippy. And Patty would get sick, we'd stop the car, and she would vomit, and I would usually have to pee, and the dog would have to pee, and then we'd get back in the car and keep going till the next time Patty had to vomit. That was pretty much our traveling. But I remember it well. I have happy memories of that time. I loved the area that we went to. It was always pretty. Canada was fantastic. We drove down from Vancouver to, Dad had a sister, actually he had a couple of sisters in Oregon, and so we would stop and see Aunt Cecil and Aunt Mary. Yeah, Mary was in, I think, about Hillsboro, Oregon, and I had several cousins, first cousins, but I really didn't, I was the youngest of all of them, so I really didn't get to know them very well. Dad had one sister here in Southern California, Cora Beatty, and she lived in Palm Springs, so she was closer, and I got to know her quite well, but she didn't have any children, so it was just me. And, well, my sister, and we liked to see Cora a lot. Well, that trip was 1948 that we did the big trip in the Studebaker Champion, license plate California, 52X631. And why I remember that, I have no idea after all these years. But they decided, you know, to take us traveling. The only thing was Patty and I had to write diaries of every trip we took. So I had diaries. I had to write the road we were on. Now, there were no freeways in those days. So we did a lot of Highway 66 and 99. I remember those pretty well. And where we stopped for food, where we stopped overnight, the rivers, the mountains, the capital of the states we went to. So I really always got a good grade in geography because of all the travels. And I loved it. I really, truly loved the traveling. And we did a lot of it in the car until Mom and Dad had a little more money, and also airplanes became more popular. And then, of course, we started flying. But I went all through grade school at San Dimas, and that was certainly fun. My best girlfriend was Jackie Wrights, and our mothers introduced us when we were 4 years old after church. I went to the San Dimas Community Church, and so my friends were very close to me. We're all from the church there, and down the street on the other corner was the Baptist church, and then there was the Methodist church on another corner. So we all got together after church on Sunday night because we would have young people's programs, and it was just fun. It was a fun time. Jackie and I stayed friends forever. I still talk to her, and she lives, of course, still up in that area. She lives in Claremont, so, and I'm in San Diego, so I don't get to see her often. We just talk on the phone. Anyway, where was I? What year? I was in about the 3rd grade when we really started traveling a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean every holiday, long weekend, and summer we would go. And Dad was a real estate man, so he could kind of plan his trips around his business. And if he had an escrow closing or whatever, he would plan our trips around all that, or he would come home. So we traveled all over the western United States, Canada, and Mexico, up until was probably in the fourth, fifth grade before we started traveling a little further. And by that time, airplanes were starting to take us to Chicago to see Dad's one sister. Um, that was a real experience for me. She lived kind of what I believe they call a tenement, and she had a lot of kids. And I had never experienced anything like this, where you have to walk up so many stairs and they only had a few rooms. And I felt so sorry for them, because here I was living out in the country. I mean, we always had room for anything. Um, Orange groves were my playgrounds all through school. Actually, clear through high school, I lived on orange ranches. So going back to Chicago and seeing people living in tenements was such a shock to me. Then we would see the big city of Chicago, which was nice, but I was used to Los Angeles, so it didn't really surprise me, the size of the town. It was quite pretty on the lake, and I was introduced to some first cousins I didn't know I had. So that trip was really fun. We went on down into Iowa and saw a lot of my other cousins. Mother's brother, Orrin, lived in Farragut, Iowa, and he was the principal, I think he was the superintendent of all the school district there. And then Dad had relatives in Missouri. Mother and Dad were from, mother in Iowa, Dad from Missouri, but their towns were only like 5 miles apart right on the border. So Dad certainly always claimed Missouri, and Mother always claimed Iowa, even though they were so close. And we would go back. Dad had got a lifetime passage on Union Pacific Railroad, so as long as we wanted to, we took the train back to Iowa, Missouri, and saw the countryside by train until, of course, the airplane started and Mom and Dad had a little bit more money, and then we started flying. But I really liked going on the train. That was fun. Sleeping in the, what are they called? The Pullmans, and they'd have the Mom and Dad slept down here, and Patty and I slept up here, which was really great, but they weren't really air conditioned. And Patty and I drank a lot of water all during the day, so we were always having to get up and go to the bathroom, which bothered Mother a lot. But I had fun with it. It was a good, very pleasant memory for me. And then we would see all of the relatives back east. Well, we called it back east, Iowa and Missouri. Well, they're east of California. So they all had farms. One aunt had Dad's sister had a really big hog farm, and I had a first cousin who taught me how to. We were both small. I'm saying 6, 8 years old, and taught me to grab a hold of the pig's tail, and they pulled us all around the pig. I can't imagine how we smelled, but it was very fun. And the fresh corn off the cob, and oh my Lord, it was good. We ate it every night, and I loved it so much. I ate it every meal. Mother finally told me I couldn't have any more after a while, but I could have had that little white corn off the cob is so good, and I really quite liked it back there. During the war, my grandpa went back there and had a farm in Springfield, Missouri. Now that was southern Missouri. They had lived more northern Missouri, my dad's family. So when we went back to see my grandpa, Kurt, on the farm in Springfield, was a whole different thing for me. And that was the first time I had raw milk. He would go milk the cows, and I would drink a glass of milk. I kind of think that's why I don't like milk very well. But I would drink it if you put Bosco. I don't know if y'all know what Bosco is, but it's chocolate syrup. And that's what we had at that time. And I had Bosco in all kinds of milk, and then I would drink that milk. I also learned how to milk a cow. He taught me how to do that. And played in the hayloft, I didn't have those sort of things here on our orange ranch in California. So it was quite fun for me. I liked it a lot. And then we just went a lot of traveling during my childhood. From going back east to the family to touristy things like the redwoods. I remember the first time we drove through that huge tree that you can drive through, and I couldn't believe I had driven through a tree. Somewhere there's pictures of me. And getting a burl, you know what a burl is? A piece of redwood that they cut off the side. It's kind of a hump on the tree, and they cut it off, and Mother would put it in a plate, and it would grow redwood needles off of it. It smells so good. We had one of those in the house on top of our first television, next to the TV light that you, of course, had to have on your new television because you might hurt your eyes. And you had to have a light, and you couldn't sit too close to see the television. I think we got that when I was probably, I don't know, 10 to 12. And that was one of the most exciting things that I can remember, is even though I loved all the trips we took, but getting a television for the first time was just incredible. We had about a 12-inch screen in a great, huge box. I don't know, I guess like a dresser that you'd put it in. But I watched The Lone Ranger perfectly well on that little TV, sitting in front of it. I think it was Saturday nights or Sunday nights. And that was so much fun. I have such pleasant memories of that. I really do. I had a lot of fun with it. When I got to be about 9 or 10, Dad bought me a horse, and her name was Pat. Well, my sister was Patty, so Mom and Dad said I couldn't call her Pat, but of course that's the name she knew all those years, so they said I could call her Pet, and so I had Pet. And I don't know if you remember, but behind my St. Grampy's house there was a corral, a shed, and it had originally been a corral, so I had a place to keep her there. But then we rented a place over just across the street and down a bit, had a big couple of acres, and so I kept her over there quite a bit. So I had a horse for probably 3 or 4 years, and I loved to ride. I would ride in the Chino ride every year, and one thing I admit is that I was never not afraid of it. I always had a little bit of a fear of a horse. So I'm sure the horse knew that. And I was never thrown like my daughter was, but I certainly watched it. I was always a little bit afraid that that would happen. But I had riding lessons. I learned English riding lessons, so I learned to post. I learned to ride properly. I really liked the clothes. I got the cowboy boots and the cowboy shirts and the whole thing for the the Western riding. So that was a fun time and that happened, I'd say, 3 or 4 years of my grade school time. I think we sold the horse probably when I started high school, when I was 13 or 14, because I just wasn't riding so much anymore. And she was a good horse. She was a really good horse. She was smaller than a big quarter horse. She was just a smaller one. Brown, very cute, I thought.